Hello, welcome to our next Linux tutorial. In this video, we're going to cover file permissions. So we're going to see how to read file permissions, and we're also going to see how we can modify the file permissions. Okay. So I am currently logged in into a Linux instance, into a virtual machine. This is running on AWS. So I am logged in as EC2 user. Okay, so this is the user, EC2 user. Okay, you can always see who the user is by typing the command who am I. And this tells you the currently logged in user, so EC2 user. Okay, so let's go ahead. So currently, if I do ls to list the content of the current directory, have nothing. So we can see where we currently are by doing pwd. And this tells us we are currently located in the folder EC2 user. Okay, so this is the home location of the user. All right, so we currently don't have anything inside our folder, so it's empty. So we're gonna go ahead and create a folder. So I'm gonna say make dir, and I'm just gonna call this folder number 1. So if we do ls again, now we can see we have something inside the current directory. We have something called folder 1. Okay. And also I'm gonna go ahead and create a file. So for file, we use the command touch, and I'm gonna call this file 1. And we can do ls again to list the content. And now we can see that we have two things. We have two items. We have one thing called file number 1 and one thing called folder number 1. Okay. So this is a folder or a directory, and this one is a file. Okay. So now to see what the permissions are for each item, we have to do ls and then with an extension -l. Okay. So now this one gives us extra items. So we see we have a file and a folder, but we can also see we have a whole lot of other things here. And I'm gonna go ahead and explain what these things mean. So this first section, this is a permission section, okay? So I'm gonna come back to this and explain exactly what the different things that we are looking at, what the permissions are right now. And this one is our permissions. These are our permissions. This one is something called a hard link, a file hard link. So this is a little bit outside the scope of the video, so I'm not gonna go into this, but you can just do a Google search on hard link and read a little bit about it. And the next thing is the user or the owner of the file, the person who actually created this. So this is in our case, we are logged in as EC2 user, so we are the one who just created this. So it says EC2 user. And this one is the group that the file or the folder belongs to, okay? And since we are logged in as EC2 user, by default, the group is also EC2 user group, okay? Unless you actually specify the group that the file should belong to. But by default, it just belongs to the user group, okay? So this is the user, and this is the user group, same name. The next item, this is the size of the file or the size of the folder if it's a folder. In this case, since it's a file, so this is the size of the file itself, okay? I believe this is the setup in megabytes or maybe in bytes, but this is the size. And the next thing is the date in which the actual file was created. In this case, so based on the time, so this is April 2nd. So based on the time of the, I should say the time zone, okay? Because I'm currently in a different time zone than this, but this is showing based on the system time zone. So this is April 2nd. This is the time when the file was created. And I mean, this is the date when the file was created, and this one is the time that was created. And of course, the last item is just the name of the file or the name of the folder. So in this case, this is the name that we gave the file number 1. So this is the name. And same thing with this, with this other row. So we have the permissions, which I'm going to come back to, more details. We have the number of hard links. In this case, it's 2 instead of 1. We have the user or the owner of the folder, the person who created this. We have the user group. We have the size of the folder. So I believe this is probably in bytes, as it's empty. So, and then we have the dates it was created, and then date, and then we have the time it was created. Okay, so that's that. And now let's go back at the beginning of permissions. So what do these things actually mean? Okay, so these things, we can separate this into 4 sections. We have the first item, and we have these 3. We have a set of 3 things. We have these 3, we have these 3, and then we also have these 3. Okay, so the very first column, the dash, means that this thing is a file. Okay, so if you see the first item is a dash, that means that it's a file. And if it starts with a D, this means that it is a folder or a directory. That's the reason why I created a file and a folder, so we can see the difference between the two. Okay, so this one you can see has a dash at the beginning, and this one has a D. So this one is a folder or a directory, and the first one is actually just a file. So you see it says dash. Okay, and the rest of the items are the same on both ends. So I'm just going to go ahead and explain. So we have 3 parts. The first part belongs to this one. Is for the user. This one tells us the permissions that the user has or the owner of the file has. And the second part is the permission of the group that the file belongs to, okay? The permissions that the group has. And this one is everybody else, okay? Everybody who is not specified in as owner or in a group. They have these permissions right here. Okay, so what are the permissions? Okay, so let's look at this one since this one has a set of all the permissions available. So we have 3 things. Okay, so if you look at these first 3, we have R. R stands for read, or it means read, meaning that you can read the file, you can see what's inside the file. Okay, that's what the R means. The W means write. The write means that we're able to edit the file, so you can change and modify the file, the content of the file. So that's the W. It means you're able to do that. In this case, it means the user or the owner of the file is allowed to, or the folder is allowed to read, is allowed to edit. And X means execute. It means to execute, okay? So let's say if we had a file that maybe it's an application. If you have the X permission, it means you're able to run the application or you're able to execute the application. Okay, so it just means execute. Okay, so we have read, we have write, and we have execute. So RWX, read, write, execute. So the first 3 sets is for the user or the owner. And the next 3 sets is the permissions of the group. And the next 3 sets are the permissions of others, or it can be abbreviated as or everybody. We can just say everybody else has these permissions, right? Everybody not specified as user or as within a group. Their permissions are set here. Okay. So for the file, the user or the owner has the read and the write permissions. The group only has the read permissions. They're not allowed to write or they're not allowed to execute. And everybody else only has the read permissions, okay? So those are the permissions. Now, how do we change these permissions? How do we modify the permissions? Okay, so to do that, we use the command chmod or chmod. So chmod. This is the command we're gonna use to actually change the permissions, okay? So how do we do that? So we're gonna say chmod. So I'm gonna go over 2 methods of doing this. First, I'm gonna go over the long method, and then I'm gonna show, I'm gonna demonstrate a shorter method of doing this. So the longer method, so you can say CHU mode, and then if I want to set up the permission of the user, so I'm gonna say I'm gonna use u equals, and let's say I want to give the user. So currently I'm gonna work on this file. So currently the user has the read and write permissions. I'm gonna change this to read, write, and execute. So I'm gonna give the user full permissions: the read permissions, the write permissions, and the execute permission. Okay. So that's that. And next, we're gonna give the group permission. So that's G. When I say G equals, so currently the group only has the read permission. So I'm gonna change this and I'm gonna give the group a read and a write permissions. So I'm gonna say R and W. Okay. And last but not least, we have other for all. Then we're gonna give others permissions. So currently they have the read permissions. So I'm just gonna go ahead, I'm gonna change it to, just for the sake of the demonstration, to X. So we're gonna say others have the execute permissions, okay? And then once we give our permissions, at the end, we write the name of the file, okay? Since we are currently located in the same folder where we have a file, we don't need to list the path or the location of the file. Okay, by default, we're just gonna search for it here. Okay, if it was a different location, we have to start by specifying the location of the file first. Let's say it was a different location, maybe for instance, if it was in roots and then somewhere called var. If it was somewhere here, we have to specify this location. We're saying, okay, go to root and var, and then you want to find this file and then change the permission. But in our case, we are already in the location where the file is, so we don't have to specify the location. We just name the file. So that's it. So that's it. So we're just gonna go ahead now and press enter. And now I'm gonna go ahead and see what changes we have made. I'm gonna say ls-l, press enter. Now let's see if it looks exactly the way we want. So first we said the user is going to have a read, write, and execute permission. So if you come and look at the first three items, it is RWX. Okay, so previously it was RW only. Okay, so now we've added the execute permission for the user. And next thing we said, we wanted the group to have a read and a write permission. So if we come back, we look at the next set of items. So the next three items, it is read and W. So that's what we specified here, read, write. So which is what we have now here. Previously, if you look back here, it was only read, okay? We had no write and we had no execute permission. And the next item, we said that we want others to have the execute permission. Okay, so if we look at the last three items, so this last three, 1, 2, 3, we see that we only have the execute. And if you look at the previous permission, and it was only write. We had no writes, or it was only read. We only had no write and we had no execute. So now we've changed it to execute. So meaning that it has worked. And of course, we can do the same thing for the folder. I can change the permission of the folder to the same permissions as this one as well, if we want to. So I can just recall my previous command by pressing the top arrow key. And then I'm going to change, instead of file 1, I'm going to say folder 1. Okay. So folder 1. So we're going to give folder 1 the same permissions as file 1. Okay. So currently it's set up as read, write, execute, read, no write, execute, read, no write, execute. So we're going to change this to match this. So we just press enter and we record the previous command. We just tap arrow key and ls-l L. Now, if we look at our permissions, we see they are both identical. See? And of course, as I said previously, the first item tells you that this is a file. In this case, it tells you that this is a directory. Okay, so it's a D. So now we have C, one way of doing this. So I'm gonna go ahead and proceed and show a different way of doing the same thing. So I'm gonna clear my screen. And I'm gonna do ls-l again. Okay, so now I'm gonna go ahead and show a different way of doing the same thing. So we can also do this instead of writing. So let me just recall our comment. So instead of doing this, so I'm gonna work on the file again, file number 1. So here we see, we said it's kind of a long command we gave. We said user, we write the permission for user, group, we write the permission for the group, other, we write the permissions for others. But we can reduce all these specifications with just maybe 3 letters. Okay, with just 3 letters, we can give the full permissions that we want. So how do we do that? So what we do is we use numbers, numerical values. Okay. So the read for read, just for read. No, let me go the other way. So we have read. Okay, so we have these 3 things. We have read, writes, and executes. Okay. So the read, we're gonna represent the read with the number 4. Okay. Read, just remember that read equals number 4. Write equals number 2. And executes equals number 1. So if you wanna give a read permission only a read permission, you're just gonna write a number 4, and it's only gonna give a read permission. If you only wanna give a write permission, you're just gonna say number 2. Okay, you're just gonna write number 2, and that's gonna give a write permission. And if you just want to give an execute permission, you're just going to write number 1, and that gives you an execute permission. Okay. And if you want to combine the permissions, let's say in our case, for this case, for instance, we have the read, the write, and the execute permissions for the user. If we want to give all 3, all you have to do is add up the numbers. Okay. So read, we say, has number 4. Write, we say, is represented by number 2, and execute, we say, is represented by number 1. So to give full permissions, read, write, and execute, we just add the 3 numbers, 4 plus 2 plus 1, which equals 7. So number 7 is gonna give full permissions. It's gonna give the read, the write, and the execute permissions. Okay. So next case here is only read and write, and there is no execute permissions. So give these permissions, we're gonna give read is number 4, write is number 2, and since we don't have execute permissions, that's equivalent to 0. So if you add 4 plus 2 plus 0, that gives you 6. Okay. So if you give the set of permissions to be 6, that means it's going to give you only the read and the write permission. Okay. And the last permission we have is only the execute permissions. And you remember we say executes is represented by number 1. So if you just want to give execute, you just write number 1, and that's going to give you only the execute permissions. Okay, so let's see exactly how this works. So I'm going to go ahead and delete all these things that we have here. So instead of writing all of those things, all we have to do is write numbers. Okay. So let's say, first I'm going to give, okay, let's change this first. So we have read, write, let's change it to, so here we have read, write, executes. Let's only give this read. So we're gonna give the user only the read permission. So read, we say, is number 4, okay? So user number 4, So this one, so all we have to do is write one set of numbers. So the first number is going to be for the user, and the second number we're going to write will be for the group, and the third number will be for others or everyone else. Okay. So number 4 means read. So this means that the user only is going to have the read permission. And the next is for the group. For the group, we're going to change the group to, we're going to give the group read and execute permission. So we're going to remove the W. So we're going to give read and write and execute. So read is 4 and execute is 1. So 4 plus 1 is 5. So we're going to write 5. And to change the last thing to, actually, yes. Let's, before I do this, let's go back. Let me show you exactly. So for these permissions, it's going to be represented by, so this is 4 permissions. Let me just demonstrate what this one would look like in terms of numbers. So this is 4 permissions, read, write, execute. So this is a 4 plus 2 plus 1, which is 7. So this is going to be 7. And if we had to write this one will be 4 plus 2 plus 0, which is 6. And last one will be 0 plus 0 plus 1, which will be 1. Okay. So this one essentially is the same as this. Okay. We can go ahead and press enter. It's not going to change anything because it's still the same thing. So if you look at here, it's still exactly the way it was before, because it's exactly what that means. This permission exactly, it represents this. Okay. Now let's go ahead and change it. Let's go back and what we were doing and try to change to something else. So I'm going to go ahead and record the command. So this is again, so the first one is for the user. This is the user permission. And the second number is for the group. This is the group permission. And the last number tells you what the permissions for others is. Okay. So number 7 is full permission. So it gives you read, write, and execute. 6 only gives you the read and the write because it's 4 plus 2. And 1 only gives you the execute permissions because the execute is 1. Okay. So let's go ahead and change it to something else. So let's give different permissions to the file. And I'm going to say, we're going to give the read only permissions to the user. So that's only 4. And for the group, we're going to give the group let's give the group the read and the execute permissions. So that will be number 5. And we're going to give others only the write permissions. That's for the sake of the argument. So write is 4. No, write is 2. Okay. Press enter. We recall our command to list the permission. And voila, 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 voila. So let's review. So the first one is 4, which is read. So the user only gets the read permission. Next number is 5, which means 4 for the read and 1 for the executes. Okay. So that's these 3. So read and execute 4 plus 0 plus 1. So that's 5. And last permission is 2, which means only write. And that is these 3 sets. Read is 0, write is 2. Read, we don't have anything for read, so it means it's 0. So normally read means it's represented by 4 since it's showing dash. The dash here, it means that there is no permission. Okay. This means there's no permission. So the W is number 2, and then there's also a 0 since there's no permission. So that's why we have a 2 here. Okay. So hopefully that explains that. So that's file permissions. So you can do the same thing on the folder, and then you'll change it accordingly as well. Okay. And you can always read more about the chmod command by checking the man page. Man chmod. This can now show you some more details about this command. Of course, you can always Google this as well. But yes, so this is for permissions. Okay, so hopefully that helps. That's the end of our tutorial. And we'll come back to more Linux tutorials on our next one. Take care.